And we are back once again. Is this Thursday already? It feels like a Tuesday. It is Thursday, August 27th, episode of Spin Cycle. Andrew Southwick, R.C. Williams, and Juliana Ormond with you here at this late lunchtime. We're just going to go through, as we always do, the headlines that are making the rounds of the news cycle today and try to bring you a little bit more context, a little bit more truth, remove the narrative spin so that you're not getting what some publisher or some political arm wants you to get. You'll get the truth, and that's what we are going to bring here. Gotta start off, my friends. We talked yesterday, actually the past 3 days. We had Dolly Parton pass away at 80 years old. Then Tim Curry, who actually didn't die yesterday, he died Tuesday, apparently, also 80 years old. And then this morning we learned of the death of Peter Cullen. Now you might ask who Peter Cullen is. I'm going to guess of the two of you, RC, you might know who Peter Cullen is better than Juliana, but I'm
Hmm.
not sure. I could be wrong. Do you know who Peter Cullen is?
I
No.
I do, but you've got to let the crowd know.
I know. I'm just asking if you know.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Peter Cullen is a voice actor, most famously known for Optimus Prime and the Transformers, the classic Optimus Prime voice, which every male child who grew up anywhere near the 80s knows the Transformers, knows the Transformers sound from the cartoon. He also did some voices in Winnie the Pooh and things like that. Believe me, Juliana, you've heard his voice more often than you probably know, and that's probably true of most of us. But he passed away at 85. We were talking yesterday. I don't believe in the superstition, but it is weird how these things happen in threes, is it not?
Yeah.
That's weird. I don't know. I don't know. Anyway,
Mm-mm.
so
Hmm.
but he did. I mean, 85 is quite a long life, and once again, just like with Tim Curry, my buddy Dylan Novak a few years ago got to meet and share the gospel with him. Don't know of his salvation or not, or his faith in Christ or not, but at least he was exposed to the gospel relatively, you know, close here. So, but anyway, certainly we'll miss the real Optimus Prime.
Hmm.
Is
Mhm.
now no more. So,
Mhm.
okay. All right, well, let's get to it today. We got a few things we're going to touch on. One, just quick updates on the Clancy trial. For last I checked this morning, the case is turned over to the jury. We're waiting for a verdict. Just this morning, it was reported by the New York Times, among others, that the judge opened up the opportunity, or the option, I should say, for the jury to come back with a manslaughter verdict or a version of a manslaughter. And so, again, with everybody's feelings all over the place when it comes to this, we just want to cut and dry down the middle. Now, again, we've gone over the timeline on the past couple episodes of the show. We don't need to rehash a lot of that here. Even in the defense's closing argument, there has been no dispute of that timeline, nor has there been a dispute of the fact that Miss Clancy was not actually ever diagnosed postpartum ahead of the trial. That was applied during trial as a part of her defense. So, again, as we said yesterday, we'd have to go back and place that upon her to make that actually happen. However, when it comes to manslaughter versus murder, here is a table, and this is the differences between murder and manslaughter in the state of Massachusetts. So I wanted to make sure that we had this right. So the manslaughter can be voluntary or involuntary, and this again, that's the blue column on the right is what you'd be seeing. It's also unlawful killing without malice. That's the core definition. If it's first degree manslaughter, it means it's voluntary. Killing that would otherwise be murder is reduced by reasonable provocation, sudden combat, or excessive force self defense. So that's not a mental illness manslaughter. Second degree would be involuntary, unintentional killing caused by wanton or reckless conduct. In some cases, battery. So you get in a fight, you kill somebody. Mental state, number six. Voluntary manslaughter involves mitigation. Involuntary manslaughter involving wanton or reckless conduct. So mitigation, I think, is what the judge is offering here. So instead
Hmm.
of a not guilty by reason of insanity, the judge is saying you can convict on manslaughter, voluntary manslaughter with mitigating circumstances being the mental state. Now, again, as I mentioned yesterday, I think this opens up an opportunity for us as a nation to really look at, should these mitigating factors be a consideration on conviction on the crime, because there's no question on who committed the crime, or should they be considered more on sentencing? Like, for example, if she does need mental help, again, we're not saying don't give her mental help, but should the crime be reduced because of that, or should the sentence be altered or adjusted for that after the fact? And I'm curious, as we've talked about this week, is there, murder is murder. The Bible, we want to see things through a biblical lens. God doesn't give any asterisk or carve out or cut out for murder, no matter what the influencing circumstances might be. Sin is sin, murder is murder, crime is crime. So I'm wondering, do you think, and maybe you don't, we can chat about that for a minute, do you think something like this, a mitigating circumstance, should be on the front end, on the criminal conviction side, or should it be on the sentencing and care, housing side after the fact?
Slippery slope, Andrew. But again, coming off of yesterday, I'm not surprised that this was the case. One of the things that I shared is that I think that one of the options that's going to be on the table is guilty by reason of insanity, life imprisonment in a mental institution. I thought that's where it might end up. These mitigating circumstances, it feels like to me, the judge wants to make sure they can get something. And with Massachusetts, I'm not necessarily surprised. We have a more intimate knowledge of the judicial system in Massachusetts from our prior work. But that said, I mean, is it based on the definitions you have on the screen, Andrew, and based on the facts of the case, is it actually manslaughter? I based on what I'm seeing here and the explanation, I don't know that it qualifies. And for the judge to come in and say, hey, look, this is an option for you, I'm a little confused. I'm not sure how that would be the case, but then again, it is Massachusetts. So
this has all become like theatrics. People are pressuring the, justice system to work with the lady, the way they think deems it needs to be. The unfortunate thing is that, if things ran the way Father intended them to be, this wouldn't be an issue. If we were all in community, if we were all supporting one another, if we were all acting like the church the way we're supposed to, those 3 children probably would not have been murdered by her. People could have come in and surrounded her and loved on her. And this entire conversation we're having about, is it manslaughter? Is it murder? Should we be talking about it before, or should it be part of her sentencing? I really don't know. But if everything was running the way Father intended for it to be running, this wouldn't be happening. Those children would be alive today.
And there is, again, in some of the later testimony, and again in the summation of the prosecution, and from the husband's testimony, Patrick, there is some evidence that she did have support. She wasn't completely shut out as the media narrative originally went out to say. It wasn't like she knocked on doors and no one was home, and that she had supportive family. In fact, during the murders, she called, because Lindsay Clancy sent Patrick out, her husband, for a couple of errands. Wouldn't it be nice if we had takeout, and then could you get some medicine for one of our kids? And he said, sure, okay. Now, Patrick Clancy is on record saying it seemed like one of her better days in talking about her mental state. So obviously he knew that. Now there was the one question I do have is, it is verified now that she had, not only had she had suicidal thoughts, she had thoughts of harming the children, and Patrick was aware of that. So I do have more questions about that.
Right.
Not necessarily, because I don't think it was a question of support. I wonder if it was honestly a question of protection. And do we have a protection problem in that sense? Because if I knew anyone was going to harm my kids, I would never leave them alone with them.
So
ever. And
that's the whole. Wait, Andrew, I just have to say that's not about protection. That's about being in community. If she had the right support, and that little baloney support that she got wasn't enough. She shouldn't have been left alone with the children. She should have had somebody in the house at all times. There should have been people around her supporting her and uplifting her. We're us looking to the government, thinking that the government's going to be able to take care of her. The father should never have left the mother alone. There should have been people in the house with them at all times. If he knew that she had a mental issue and that she was almost suicidal and homicidal, obviously, right? Then why was she even alone? That's not real support. That's not support at all. Women are going through a lot.
Well, yes, but I mean, again, like I said, though, I mean, they did. She went through multiple doctors. She had, I mean, they all, and effectively what we have too in America is, oh, you have a problem. It's not your fault. Take a pill, and that's pretty much now. That's the system. That's a system problem, but also we also are not looking at the spiritual problem. I do think there's a demonic influence here as well. I talked about that yesterday with RC. That one of the, the many of the psychiatrists who testified said it is highly unusual, if not unlikely, that someone who would be hearing voices would only hear them during the commission of a crime in which they are using the voices as in a part of their defense, and that in all the doctor visits and everything else, she never mentioned hearing voices until it got to where she's in trial and having to and making this for her defense. Having said that, would a demonic influence show up and go away in a moment like that? I think demons can certainly do that. Now, was that the case? I don't know, but there's a spiritual side too. However, what I was gonna mention to you when talking about the father is when he went to get the medicine, he was at the drugstore. She called him. He didn't answer the first time. Then she called back. He did answer, and he said that she sounded on the phone like she was busy, like doing something, but she didn't sound anywhere out of the ordinary. So it would be like if you were to call each other, or if I were to call you, or you were to call me, and I might sound a little flustered or a little like my focus is not exactly on you, but I don't sound like I'm losing my mind, right? And that's one of the pieces that the prosecution brought up. If there was a active acute psychosis there, you'd be hearing rantings, ravings. It wouldn't sound like her. Now, also, again, going back, you're married to someone. It's really hard to convince you. You'd have a hard time convincing me that, my wife could harm our kids. That you'd have a hard time really believing that, because also, listen, part of this case and part of the public perception is what people want to believe about it. That's a big deal. If people want to believe that Lindsay Clancy is a victim of an oppressed system, and then that was the chain of command, they're going to believe that no matter what the evidence shows, and no matter what the timeline is, no matter what the actions say. And the problem with our culture, too, is we say, well, your truth is yours, and you're entitled to it, and no one can tell you different. And if somebody disagrees with you, they are your enemy. So it becomes a powder keg instantly from the beginning. And I think that's a big part of it, too. What do people want to believe? Versus, well, what do the facts actually say, and what are we looking at? I would suspect, I have not, obviously the media is not talking to the judge in the case, and we're not getting interviews with the judge right now, nor should we at this point. But I would wonder if that manslaughter option, there's a couple ways to look at it. One, you could say, oh, the judge is offering manslaughter, he's letting her off the hook. Or if the manslaughter option as described in Massachusetts law is guilty with these mitigating circumstances, meaning here's a way to have a guilty verdict, because if you don't think it rises to the level of premeditation, which again, there's a lot of evidence that looks like premeditation, but if you're unwilling to believe that even as a jury, you're not going to. However, you can't deny, nobody's disputing the fact that the crime occurred and she did it. So how do you get a verdict here on earth? And unfortunately, finite human beings, we're sinful. And not only that, but we have our favorite sins that we like. And we even have things that we have excuses for our sins, or we have excuses for the sins of those that we have a particular compassion for. I'm not saying that's right. A lot of time that's skewed because it's our emotions lying to us and that kind of thing. But nonetheless, that is the reality. And perfect justice is only in the hands of God. And we have to trust that that's there. But it is interesting that a lot of the pressure on this is what people want to believe about it. And I think that has clouded our ability to look at this case objectively. All that said, that's the latest. Now it goes to the jury, and we're gonna see what the jury decides. I pray that there is justice in this matter. I pray that there is accountability and responsibility, and that we are not setting a precedent where there are carve-outs for responsibility if we come so far to a crime, because I think that's going to send us on a very dangerous road as a country going forward, particularly with the powder keg of godlessness, of my truth and not yours, and all that kind of stuff that we have right now. I don't see that getting any better if we establish certain precedents here. Okay, next story here, and this is a little lighter note, but still the nefariousness of all kinds of folks. Walmart, NRC, you brought this up. They're beginning to enact digital price labels that are coming to every store shelf in the U.S. by the end of 2026. They're rolling out digital shelf labels. They expect the technology to be in all U.S. stores by year's end. And an X account, I'm going to share this tab here as well. An X account named Evan notes, hopefully that came up on the screen, yeah. An X account named Evan notes that Kroger already has them in 25% of its locations. Walmart has 4,600 stores in 2026. The electronic shelf labels are screens that can change pricing in seconds. The FTC's own findings show retailers track location, abandoned carts, and demographic data to set prices individually. 3 states, Maryland, Colorado, Connecticut, and New Jersey, 4 states, have passed laws restricting the practice. And then Evan gives you some ways to block this. But the idea is you have an app, you have your phone, that store then can sense you driving into the lot and can then dynamically price goods according to you, which may or may not be higher than the current retail or lower than the current retail, depending on whatever factors. And I'm not sure, maybe RC, and I know you've got a little bit more on the story. What's going on?
Andrew, this actually goes back, and I encourage people to go. It airs on the Watchman Action Network pretty regularly, but I encourage people to go to our Rumble channel and look at a presentation that we did in January where we talked about threats and opportunities with AI. We specifically talked about dynamic pricing, or surge pricing, I guess, for lack of a better term. So what you're seeing now is the first install of that. And Evan, when he shared what he shared, the comments were, he got railed in the comments because people are like, well, how are they going to do that if I turn my phone off and I do this? And it's like, what you miss is what you just said. So they can sense you driving in the lot. Your phone throws off so much data, you tell it more than anybody else that you're around, right? Even down to the amount of pressure that you put on the device. So let's play that out in a very simple way. It can detect you driving on the lot. And based on the amount of pressure you put on your phone, what you've been reading and what you've been engaging with, they can get a pretty good idea of what your temperament is. When we are under stress, we are more prone to make impulse buys or buys that fill a need for us, right? If I'm stressed out and I enjoy sweets, of course, I'm going to buy an extra candy bar because it's going to make me feel better. All of that data is known going in. And then based on your dwell time within the store, how you move around, what levels you look at. By the way, the eye thing has been there for years, and most people don't know that. But all of that ends up calculating into what price you'll see when you walk by, if you choose to walk by again. And some other people are like, well, what if it's a bunch of people standing around? Well, it's going to figure out what it can get away with until that clears out. And then when one person is there and they got a bead on you, that pricing is going to change. Andrew, this has been in the works for years. And for the people who think they can turn off their phone and it not impact them, guess what? Even when you turn your phone off, it's still on. Surprise, surprise. Well, if I leave it in the car, well, if you're wearing a smartwatch, same problem. But you've already given off enough data for them to get a general idea of what's going on with you. This is just the natural progression to figure out what the maximum yield is on every human being that goes in the store. And if they can charge you a penny more, don't think that they won't take the opportunity to do it. This is phase one. And it's interesting to me that there are already states that have banned this because they know exactly what's coming.
Well, it's so biased, right? It's so racist. It's just so it's so not right. I mean, I can't believe that we're even in the place where it's like, well, if you have a little bit more money, you're spending X amount more because of, like, it's just so wrong on every level. It's so discriminatory. On top of which, who is programming the information? Like, are they going to go, oh, we know Juliana's ID on her phone, and we don't like her, so we're going to charge extra money for her to buy XYZ at Walmart. I mean, this is a very, very slippery slope that we're on.
Wouldn't there also be concerns about not just your privacy directly to Walmart or Target or whatever stores do this, but also ultimately it's going to a financial institution. So ultimately the information is going to bottleneck into a certain place. And we've already talked about how the reason you need these hyperscale data centers is because you have to store information on every human being in America 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's what those are for. We already have data centers. You're hearing interesting pushback now. The people that don't want data centers, well, they should stop using the internet, because if you don't have data centers, you won't have the internet. Except they're saying that, on the internet. We already have the internet. We already have those things. We don't need hyperscale to do it. We need hyperscale for the rest of this. So I say that to say, RC, you mentioned phase one. Is it not then the logical or illogical outcome that this is part of not only how you are tracked and traced in terms of what you buy and sell and how much you're paying at the particular cash register, but also a great way to install an enforcement mechanism so that if your social credit score isn't the way they want it to be, either you can't buy those things or the dynamic pricing sets it so high that it makes it unaffordable for you.
Absolutely. So here we are into behavior modification, Andrew. And look, I get that people are upset. They're like, you can't do this. There's all these dangers. And what we continue to tell people is, look, we've got some bad news. This has been happening nonstop. You just hadn't figured it out yet. And the device that you carry is like a homing beacon. Once again, you tell your phone and your other devices way more than you would tell any other human being. And your behavior, down to the amount of pressure that you put on the glass on your phone, is sucked into a matrix to determine your particular mood at any given time. This is one of the reasons that insurance companies will offer you discounts for being a safe driver as long as you'll plug in that piece into your car, or you'll have the app in such a way that it can track, right? Behavior modification, training, data collection. If you drive a certain way, you do a certain thing, you go certain places, your propensity for heart attack or high blood pressure or all of these other things, yeah, I can kind of triangulate that. But boy, if I got your shopping data at the grocery store, now I can nail it down. And then I can begin to tell you what you can and can't have. And I can put the barometer on it that I can make it so expensive that you just won't want to touch it.
And we already have mood tracking technology, or what's supposed to be mood tracking technology. They've also talked about that with the Carlo jacks, where, if they see your eyes darting around, or if the car's algorithm senses agitation, it might say, hey, I'm going to turn off now because you seem agitated, and that's not a safe way to drive. You may not be agitated. Your wife might be pregnant. You might be trying to get to the hospital. I mean, there could be a number of things. You could have, somebody could be in danger. You're trying to get there. All that kind of stuff. The algorithm has no idea for nuance or context or circumstance. Well, the same thing could be applied also, or the same technology can be applied to, again, going to the store. Hey, you just had a long day. You're probably a little bit stressed. We're not going to let you buy these things that wouldn't be healthy for you. Or we're not, or you know what, you shouldn't go shopping. You haven't inputted your shopping list yet. So we know that if you shop when you're emotionally fragile, you tend to make impulse buys that aren't healthy for, whatever it might be. You could see all this behavior modification coming down the line, because the different parts of it show up in different parts of our track and trace security and surveillance system. It's just not all together in one cohesive unit yet.
So, Andrew, let's just take a moment on the filthy money pig route for just a second. And I say this as a capitalist. I'm a capitalist. I love capitalism, but this is filthy money pig level. Just wait until they go the inverse and they decide, hey, this is a great time to bundle something for you. They've been doing this in grocery stores for years. You go down the ice cream aisle, they'll have scoopers there, they'll have toppings there. They're already doing that part, right? but wait until they can digitally bundle and get you to get something that's all the way across the store because it makes a great match for what they're trying to get you to buy. And then they'll drop that price just enough to get you to get both. I mean, the possibilities are endless in the worst possible way.
Once again, we're getting all the liability, none of the benefit. It's fantastic. We are doing awesome. Okay, next story. Here is an X post. We talked about this. In fact, we go into a deep dive on this, a very deep dive, on the Sunday show on Culture Crossroads. So bookmark that, whether you can see it on Beck News Channel at 5 Central or on the Watchmen Action Network or on demand after the fact, Beck TV, BEKTV.plus. You want to hear the full details of this story, but Shannon Joy, commentator, conservative commentator, she notes absolutely sickening Trump Inc., which is just a nickname, there's not a Trump Inc., there is a Trump Inc., but it's not like that, is going to make billions, maybe trillions, on the purposeful collapse of the U.S. dollar. Some of that's editorial, some of this is actually happening. Quote, on August 24th, Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, held a press conference and announced what he called the single greatest financial offensive ever marshaled against an adversary. Countries that get cut off from the dollar system still need a way to transact in dollars. The only private digital dollar with a federal bank charter is USD1, owned by the Trump family. Bessent is driving countries away from the dollar while the president's family owns the replacement. We went through that in great deal. Again, that report's coming up on Culture Crossroads, and the segment will be released online as well. But RC, I'm not going to say it's a duck, but it sure walks and talks like one.
Okay. So deep breath, because I know that we're going to be off of everybody else's Christmas card list once Culture Crossroads airs on Sunday, based on the breakdown of Scott said. I know, right? And we're not going to get our money from Grift Incorporated, but I digress.
Oh, darn.
Yeah. Tomorrow's news 6 months ago. Andrew, once again, we have been talking about this and the inherent dangers. This path started. Howard Lutnick and Scott Bessent are almost like two peas in a pod. Howard Lutnick is the Commerce Secretary of the United States. For those of you who watch the show regularly, you know we broke down his reverse engineered grift on the Iran conflict and how his family made millions, if not tens of millions or more, of dollars, basically writing insurance on the downside of what would happen with the Iran conflict. He was called to Capitol Hill on this very thing, testified, and nothing happened, which, of course, is the U.S. government. It's pretty much feckless, right? But now we have Scott Bessent, who is dressing up, in essence, the dismantling of the current economic system. We talked on the show yesterday. We will talk about it again Sunday night. You start to ask yourself, outside of being president of the United States, what Trump's responsibility in the larger world order is. His responsibility is the dismantling of the current economic system. People don't want to hear that. They don't want to believe it. I completely understand where you're at. Closely held convictions are very difficult when you get shaken. It does not take away from the fact that these things are happening right before your eyes. So enter Scott Bessent. By all accounts, a financial genius in the Keynesian economic system. That's the one you live in right now, which is kind of weird, but I digress. So what better person to put in place to wage economic warfare than someone who engineered the breaking of the Bank of England for Soros Management Fund and George Soros, and then did the same thing years later with the Japanese yen and the nation of Japan. That's where Scott Bessent really made his bones, somewhere between $1 billion and $3.5 billion in profit from what he did to the Japanese yen and the nation of Japan financially in 2013. So now we are to believe that since Iran is our adversary, and even though we have the strongest military in the world, that we cannot get the job done with regard to the Strait of Hormuz or anything else. So now we are going to wage economic warfare on Iran, by all accounts, and any other of our enemies. This is going to be the way forward. And by the way, as it happens, we're just going to shift you from the regular dollar, which is 40 trillion in debt, to this stable coin thingy that would logically make all that go away and also lock you into a system that you can't get out of. But it is for your own good, and it is the only way that the United States can be the unipolar leader in the world. That's a bag of excrement sitting on the porch that's about to get lit on fire that I want no part of. So
now we also made restrictions, in fact, restricted the federal government from creating a central bank digital currency. At the time when that news hit, we're thinking, well, hurrah, we're putting protections in, but actually what that could have been, and what it in this story what it looks like is a way to box out competition, because Trump's stablecoin then, which apparently Trump Inc. gets a 75% profit from, now becomes the fallback. So again, what that looks like is you collapse the dollar, which and it's get other countries trading off of that. They still want to use the dollar, but the replacement dollar is owned in part by President Trump and his family or his corporations or whatever the umbrella is. They make 75% profit off every one. It's now basically a transaction fee they get per US dollar. And again, where are the Republicans on this? Why isn't this, if this were, can you imagine if this were Joe Biden? Or any of them?
That's right, Corn Pop. That's right,
Yeah.
Corn Pop. Yeah.
Or Barack Obama. We'd never believe Joe Biden would be smart enough to do this, but Obama, right? He's a shrewd dealer. It's incredible. Now again, the strict evidence, to be clear and fair, and the strict evidence does not say that one equals the other, but it sure is set up to where it looks very advantageous if you are a member of the Trump clan, and or those in similar favored positions. Where do you think this goes from here?
This is what I want to say. It's amazing that the Republicans were the ones that freed the slaves way back when, and now all of a sudden we're watching the Republicans now enslave us, because we need to call this what it is. This is slavery. I mean, what they're doing, everything at the end of the day, is to put us into a control system so they can control everything that we're doing. They can kill who they want to. They can give to who they want to. They can take from who they want to. And they can absolutely control what's happening within our communities. They talked about that they wanted everybody down to 500 million worldwide. And we're at like 9 billion, almost 9 billion people. We're watching what they're doing. We're watching how they're culling us. We're watching how they're killing us, because at the end of the day, it is the people that are impacted. It's the people that are going to die because of what they're doing right now. This is called asymmetrical warfare, because they're looking to enslave us.
And it would be, as we've contended before, that World War III is already upon us. It's not necessarily what you see overseas right now, but it's a war on the middle class. The middle class is what stands in the way of the oppressors being able to oppress everybody. The middle class is why the rulers cannot rule the world. The middle class is why people like Dennis Meadows wrote books about how we need to have an equitable, equal way for enough people to die on the planet, so we're down to about 1 billion people. Because the wizards of smart, globalist, technocratic, transhumanist, what they believe is that if they can get the world down to a manageable number that they can control, then they're going to set up a utopia, and of course we'll own nothing because we won't be allowed to. We'll like it, et cetera, all these things being laid in. But the problem is the middle class is in the way. Why is that? Because we are the ones who earn money, we start businesses, we rise up financially, especially. They don't like that because they can't gatekeep our earning potential. So they'll disincentivize our earning potential. That's why I think one of the reasons why you have that on the other end, where people who are on assistance, if you all of a sudden your earnings rise above a certain amount, you don't get that assistance anymore. I know plenty of people who don't take raises or who don't take promotions because they'll lose their benefits. Well, so we're disincentivized on one end. They're trying to gatekeep on the other, and in the middle, well, they're trying to squeeze you out. So food is more expensive, gas is more expensive, utilities are more expensive, the dollar is being debased, if not collapsed, and the policies they're doing are inflict self-inflicted harm. We're doing this to ourselves. And I wonder too, why wouldn't these people want power, plain and simple? There has to be a benefit to them for what they're doing. In the old United States of America 40 years ago, it was not in a politician's best interest to enact a policy and leave it there that everybody could feel, especially in their pocketbooks. That's one of the reasons why Clinton, and with the Gingrich-led House, and when he was the Speaker, Clinton triangulated. We had a balanced budget. We actually shrank government, objectively shrank the size of government. That's the last time that happened. It's also the last time we had a balanced budget in America. And I'm not singing Clinton's praises overall, but that was the last time we actually did things from DC that made sense for you and me, the American people. Ever since then, we've been blowing the spending out and crushing the middle class with interventionist and globalist policies. That's what I would say. I'll give you the last word here because I know we're coming up on time.
So, in the words of former President Barack Obama, if you like your feudalism, you can keep your feudalism because that's where you're headed.
Crazy.
Is there any way? How do we stop this? It seems they're just doing this to us, right? How do we stop it? How do we hedge against it? Is there a course of action we can be looking at or start to do?
Well, it's the reason why we built Watchman Action in our curriculum, because when we, the people, come together and do what we need to do and advocate for the things that are important, we'll be able to change the government. But right now, if we're sitting at home, we're not going to be able to do anything. So now we're saying to people, it's time for us to stand in the streets and do the things that we need to be doing. We, the community, need to come together and do for the people, not sit back and wait on the government.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this Thursday, August 27th edition of the Spin Cycle. Oh my goodness. I shudder to think what's going to happen between now and tomorrow's episode, but hopefully it'll be a little lighter. Lots of stuff too that we need to be aware of and watchful of. But again, we wanted to bring you at least a conversational, here's the truth. You can do what you want with it. You can agree with us or not. That's fine. Let us know in the comments if you're on different social media pages. We'd love to hear from you. Keep it civil if you would. We do try to make it available for families as well, and respectful of each other, even if we have differences of opinion or worldview. And again, like, share, subscribe. RC, as we close, let people know where they can find us in all of our broadcasting efforts.
Yes. So all things Watchmen Action start at Watchmen, MEN, it's plural, watchmanaction.org. If you're looking for us on the socials, super easy. Whichever one you go to, just type Watchmen Action in the search bar and we will come up. You can also catch the Spin Cycle weeknights at 9:30 Eastern on the brand new Watchmen Action Network. That's 24/7. Beck Cable Channel 40 in the great state of North Dakota and streaming everywhere you might expect, including watchmanaction.org. For Andrew Southwick, all things Culture Crossroads, Spin Cycle, and his incredible monologues, you can go to YouTube, type in Culture Crossroads 316, and you'll find all that good stuff. And Andrew, I would be remiss if I did not remind people to not be Morions.
That's right. Don't be a Morion. We've got to get swag for that. We got to make Morion a thing. Got to make Morion a thing. That is too good. All right. For R.C. Williams, Juliana Ormond, I'm Andrew Southwick, the original Morion. And you heard it here first. This has been the Spin Cycle. Thanks for being with us today. We'll see you again tomorrow.